I'm a pretty decent fan of Monster Hunter. I joined around the time Generations was the current game, getting it as a birthday gift from my brother and marking that as my first real experience with the series. It was very different from what I was used to, but it was addictive. It's like it sunk its teeth into my brain like a snake and poisoned me with knowledge of how to fight a Kushala Daora, one of the elder dragons of the series, and where I peaked at the game. It gave me challenges and many frustrations at points, but taught me, the dumb kid that could barely read at the time, just how far good preparation and planning could take you. It's still my favorite game in the series, regardless of whether or not it's considered a mainline game, and for the most part, I stuck with the series ever since. For the uninitiated, Monster Hunter is an action game where you hunt monsters. That's the simple explanation. The slightly more long-winded explanation is that Monster Hunter is a never-ending cycle of hunting monsters to make stuff out of them, to hunt bigger monsters to make even better stuff, until you end up finding something that could turn a functioning society into a crater for an off-the-record guild request. Most of your reason for doing so is entirely your own, or mainly because someone asked you to, i.e. the village where each game takes place, or some random schmuck on the street. They're very straightforward games plot-wise, assuming the game even has much of an overarching plot, which the recent games have tried to do, to mixed results. That being said, sometimes the story in the background is way more interesting than whatever's happening in front of you, and if you are curious, the series does have some pretty cool lore. I, however, am not a hunter for the lore. I am a hunter for the monsters, and I still need to get that Rathalos gem. Get over here! Guild authorization or not, I'm going to wear you. Ranging from wingless to the winged, fur to scales, fire breathing too.
What is that? That must mean...
There's quite a variety of monsters to fight. Some monsters you won't even be able to see until you leave low rank, the quote-unquote tutorial of the game, and hit high rank, where the game quote-unquote actually begins. More on that later, but how you'd prepare to fight these is a different story. In the past, there was a lot more preparation you had to do, with a lot less hand-holding depending on the game. The beginning of a playthrough was getting yourself established with the necessities like healing items, rations to keep up your stamina, and maybe some small gear upgrades before you do your first real hunt. There were some tutorials you could glean from the hunter's notes, but most of your learning is either going to come from doing village quests, your own experience, or from hunter veterans. The more recent games, World and Rise, made an effort to somewhat minimize the amount of prep needed before you could start. In Wilds, the game just thrusts you into your first hunt after a few cutscenes, and give you everything you need right out the gate. I kinda wish there was more build up to this moment, but I suppose for newcomers this does help them get into the action faster. I digress. Regardless of whatever items you pack, you also need to choose a weapon. There are currently 14 weapon types, and trying to explain every one of them would bring the pacing of this video to a screeching halt. Just understand that each weapon type stands out in their own ways, and there is no one-size-fits-all type of weapon. It comes down to what you prefer the most, and in order to learn that, you're gonna have to experiment. If it feels good, then rock it. If not, then try another weapon. See which one feels good to use, or find something you can grasp easily. No one should be getting mad at you for using a specific weapon type. As long as things die and people are having fun, the meta doesn't really matter. Aside from your weapon, you also have armor to think about. In this one, people will definitely get mad at you for not having. Every piece of armor in the game has its own passive effects. For example, if you play Hammer and you find yourself having a hard time concussing a monster, then look for armor that has the Slugger effect, which will make doing so much easier. Killing things faster is also cool, I guess. Not only that, but you can come across decorations, which also carry these abilities. Armor and weapons occasionally have these slots on them that lets you insert these decorations, meaning with the right equipment and enough of these slots, you can mix and match a ton of abilities for different builds. There's always the straightforward hit it until it dies build, but you could do other things like eating mushrooms to nullify dysentery and give buffs to yourself and your allies. It's a nice way of letting you make a build from the abilities your equipment gives you, but also slot in some extra stuff to make up for its shortcomings, or just make it even more potent. The cycle is thus: go hunt monsters, make new stuff, repeat. Now that I've given you a very rudimentary and rushed explanation of what Monster Hunter is, let's actually talk more about the recent entry itself, Wilds. Very cool. Actually, let's talk about running the game first. You would think that all you need to do is go on Steam, give Capcom 70 of your clans, install and then play, right? Maybe tune some graphic and audio settings while you're at it for a smoother experience. You would be right. At first, but eventually, if you're me, who has what would be considered slightly above a potato by some people in the modern day, you'll crash. Well, no big deal, just relaunch the game and pick up where it last saved and forget about it. For a while, then suddenly, it'll crash again. And then, you won't even be able to launch the game anymore. Okay, maybe I need to verify the integrity of my files. Nothing was found, it just kept crashing. Alright, what if I start the game from the exe and not from Steam? Maybe run it as administrator just in case. That worked. For about a minute. Okay, well an update just came out, so maybe that didn't install properly. Time to reinstall the game. Okay, that seems fine. I'm hunting this monster and it's going pretty well. Okay, let's see what the internet has to say about this. It's like day 3, but maybe someone found something. What? What the fuck? Okay, so apparently the cause could have been related to one of two things, either frame generation, which I disabled earlier, or the crash report in the game's files. I'm not software savvy enough to understand why these things broke the game and half my footage, but basically, unless you have a semi-beefy PC, unlike me apparently, you might want to disable frame generation and delete the crash report and crash report DLL. If I had to take a wild guess, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I assume that the crash report was probably the main culprit because as of writing this, I have yet to experience another crash. My game crashed.
No!
Correction, I have only experienced a single crash. Alright, now that that's out of the way, we can finally, actually, maybe start playing the game. The core gameplay loop of Wilds is mostly the same from past games, just a little more yellow and stuttery. The first zone is completely open to you once you get past the first few quests, and you're given free reign to fight any of the monsters that you see. You unlock the other zones as you progress through low rank and interact with the mostly forgettable cast of characters. I'm mixed about this game's story. On one hand, it was relatively short and might have had some cool ideas. On the other, it was not very interesting. Conflicting with your free reign to explore the map, the story feels like you're on rails the entire time, and Capcom writing is about as subtle and detailed as a brick going through your window. In past games, low rank, you had key quests you had to complete to do the big urgent quests that would let you rank up, and the nice thing about that is you could do them in any order you want. But here, you're forced down a linear path, fighting monsters in a specific order, and while you could fight any of the currently unlocked monsters at any time, it wouldn't make the story progress, and with how quickly the gearing process in low rank kinda is, you don't really benefit from it at all. You might just say to yourself, then just skip it. You very much can, but you can't skip the walking sections that are littered throughout it, and you're required to pick dialogue options from time to time to continue. It would help if the writing was more interesting during these, but for the most part, and to me personally, it wasn't, and the forced walk and talks just further exacerbated my annoyances with it, to the point where it felt like a hindrance that stops you from actually playing the game. My hot take is I'd rather they just not have an overarching plot at all, but I have a feeling it's mostly there to onboard newcomers. And it does. It certainly does. I won't go into too much more detail about it though, since there might be some fans of it. And besides, just because I didn't like it doesn't mean there won't be people that do. Art do be subjective like that. If you're in the camp that didn't like the story though, don't worry, because the transition between low and high rank is so dramatic it feels like a completely different game and story. Mainly because all sense of linearity is mostly gone, and lets you do the thing the series is known for: hunt more monsters. High rank is quite literally where the entire game lets you go do whatever you have available, and as you complete quests and increase your hunter rank, the available roster gets even bigger. When allowed, you can even save these monsters in your maps as investigations. Over time, for you to hunt the same monster over and over and over for a limited amount of times. Don't worry, the guild approves of this and will even reward you handsomely for your, efforts to preserve the nature's balance. Yeah! It's nice to go around such a seamless world and have everything slowly open up to you as you pick and choose what you put your time into. It also felt like I had a reason to go back to previous zones too, because there might be side quests I could do to make hunter rank grinding a little less empty, Or maybe because there was a new monster introduced to the zone and I could make some cool armor out of it. But this being more focused on the open world, I run into the open world conundrum, a term I've coined right now. I have an issue with open world games where I set very clear and focused goals only to end up getting distracted by literally every single detour imaginable. For example, I'm going to go here in the Windward Plains so I can hunt Talioth for their scales. These scales will give me the last piece I need to upgrade a Thunder Res talisman, which will give me a max level Thunder Res passive. With the talisman, I wouldn't have to face thunder spewing monsters with a negative Thunder Res stat using my main build. Is that a tempered Balahara? Progression in high rank is still pretty satisfying, getting to climb up and just hunt whatever you want and eventually forming a semi-cohesive build when you hit endgame. I think it's incredibly funny how this game managed to hit two completely opposite sides of progression, but I digress. Let's move on. You're not alone in your crimes against nature, however. Accompanying you is your trusty Palico, your sidekick in action who gets way too excited to see a knife and will support you in various ways, such as healing you, cleansing status ailments, and small scale bombings, and your trusty Sacred, able to ferry you across the world and save you from your bad mistakes. All you have to do is whistle and they'll rush to your side and take you to wherever you need to go. Sometimes. It's a little hard to use. I don't think they programmed the auto travel with gliding in mind. It can be a little OP to have a Sacred sometimes, but with how lost it can be, it evens out. With it, you can also bring a second weapon, which, while cool, didn't really give me any advantages aside from being able to kill the monster in a slightly different way, but on the fly. You got your pals, you got your gear, but you can't go hunting on an empty stomach. Food is an essential and almost mandatory factor in fueling your bloodlust. You get incredibly invaluable effects from them, like more healing, occasionally reducing the damage you take, and the ability to not die once. If you ever find your food buff running low or ran out from the visual indicator that your health and stamina are far lower than it normally should be, you can whip out your portable grill in the field and grill up some tasty lettuce to bring it back up. And yes, you can do this from anywhere, at any time, in nearly any place regardless of the circumstances. It is said that the most courageous hunters flaunt their meals in front of their soon-to-be prey, mostly for fun. Those hunters then died, but hey, maybe you can get to high rank without such a need for food because honestly this game is a little bit on the easier side, and I'm bad at Monster Hunter. Some monsters are just really not that tough and they have very low health pools until you get to Jindahad. He's kinda tough. But it's not a bad thing for the game to be somewhat easier than its predecessors. If anything, the easier difficulty just makes turning them into a mantelpiece that much easier, which I'm not against since the endgame inevitably becomes the glamour. You can get your best in slot, but can you serve in it? Didn't think so. Some other things. Focus mode is a new feature that lets you aim and be more precise. Gone are the days of missing your max charge slash because the monster moves slightly too far to the left. Now you can aim and re-angle your attack much more freely. This is honestly a very nice feature and one I hope stays. However, with focus mode comes a new mechanic involving wounds. When you create a wound, your scout flies will glow red around it, indicating that you can use a focus attack. This mechanic shouldn't be carried over or should probably be nerfed in some way. It's kind of exploitable, preventing the monster from doing anything for most of the attack, and you are, as far as I can tell, completely invulnerable while performing one. It's satisfying to do, just very overpowered. Ardian weapons. They're here. I messed around with it a bit. They're essentially weapons you can make from materials you can only get from fighting tempered monsters. Basically just beefier versions of the original ones. Things like broken blades or cracked discs, all randomized with different elemental types and infusions. If you make a weapon with at least 2 of the 3 parts having one specific type of element, you'll get a weapon with that element. The infusions just give it a buff of either attack or affinity. You can also reinforce these weapons with special ore to give even more bonuses. Also, the slots in them are actually kind of insane. I don't hate the idea of a separate weapon crafting system, though it does feel weird when you sometimes get a weapon that can outclass or be comparable to a high rank weapon, with not as much effort put into making it. If the video so far might have come off as somewhat negative, then let me say that I think Monster Hunter Wilds is still a pretty fun game when I can play it. To me, it's kinda hard to screw up something as simple of a concept as Monster Hunter, and while I was worried at first that they somehow found a way, it does get immensely better when you actually get to high rank. The roster from the base game is great, its progression feels really fast, which I didn't expect, but not totally against, and it all culminates into a decent title, but still probably on the weaker side. It lays the groundwork for what could be, and so long as they tune up the difficulty some more, I'd be eager to see where this goes from here. Maybe not the first choice I'd offer for newcomers to start with, but it'd probably be my second one that I'd pitch. After a few months of patches maybe. If pushing through an uninteresting 10 to 20 hour story to get to the quote-unquote good part sounds unappealing, then I don't know. You're probably better off playing one of the other games. World has a story that drags on, but the difficulty is a bit more finely tuned. Rise is still a very solid game, and there's still great entry points into the series, though if you want to try something a bit more old school and have a Nintendo Switch in the year 2025, you could try Gen U. It's pretty fun. The only other reason why I'm recommending those games is because they also have and will have the most amount of content they'll ever get. Obviously, those games have existed long enough to get title updates and their signature expansion, Iceborne and Sunbreak respectively, and Gen U is literally an expanded version of Monster Hunter Generations. But who knows? Some people might like coming back to a game you can keep up with as it gets updates and more stuff, kinda like a diet MMO of sorts. Again, there's a good foundation here, but it's still rough, like pretty rough. I feel in the future this game could stand up on its own and maybe even be one of the best games in the series. Guess we'll have to check back in about a year or so from now once that inevitable $30+ expansion drops, right? I kind of feel icky saying that. It's like a norm at this point. Whatever. Thank you for watching.